Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio. Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to thehoosier.com On3. Now with On3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football. Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at thehoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today. Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this fantastic Friday. Alec, I believe you are muted there. You're ready to go. Man, it has been a long week. Lots going on, but not a lot happening as far as on paper for Indiana basketball. And congratulations again. You guys are killing it at thehoosier.com. Great coverage all week long. Make sure you go to thehoosier.com now with On3 and subscribe. And otherwise, you're missing out on some great content right now. Darren DeVries is getting his staff. His staff is pretty much intact, but the official announcements are starting to trickle out.
Yeah, we obviously got Nick Norton yesterday. I think that was, everyone knew, Nick Norton was going to be coming over from West Virginia for pretty much, 2 weeks now. And then, the other one who is all but, pretty much official is Drew Adams. He's been out at the state championship. He was out at, Chipotle Nationals earlier this week. So was Nick Norton. Obviously, Darren DeVries was as well. But Drew Adams is the other one that hasn't been, quote unquote, officially been introduced, albeit, everyone knows he's part of the staff. And then, probably a couple more to obviously trickle out here over the next few days. But I would expect, some sort of formal announcement, probably definitely by Tuesday, by the end of the NCAA tournament here, if not maybe today or Monday.
And while fans are looking forward to that, the thing that they want to hear and are excited to hear are player names, which will be a little slower in coming about because, first of all, you've got a lot that you have to add, and then getting them to go through all of the processes because they're not just visiting one school usually. They're potentially going to other places as well. So they have to get all those in. Conor Enright is one that is on the dotted line now, and that is one roster spot down. Tucker DeVries, another one in addition to Trent Sisley. So you've got 3 of the 13, 10 more to go. Well, I guess 15 if you want to have 15, but we'll stick with the 13 number right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, all the attention is, I shouldn't say turns to because it's been with him for probably the last 48 hours is Josh Dix, the Iowa transfer guard. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say miscommunication or different takes about this recruitment over the last 72 hours, but definitely the last 48 where, some people think it's Indiana, some people think it's Illinois. There was some chatter last night when talking to a few people that Iowa was potentially back in the race for it. But the two teams that have always, been brought up in the conversations have been Illinois and Indiana. And I think everyone fully expects it to be one of those two. There has been way more Indiana talk, I would say, over the last day or so than there was even right after his visit to Indiana, which wrapped up on Tuesday, right? So I think, Indiana seems to be the consensus one team that everyone knows is in that final two, probably. Creighton and Kansas were the two other teams that he visited. Creighton's probably the one wild card. There's been a lot of rumors that potentially he does not want to play with Owen Freeman again, his teammate from Iowa that transferred to Creighton earlier this offseason. Who knows how realistic? I've heard both sides of that. That is true, that isn't true. But being close to home, being around family. He's talking to a few people last night. Very quiet, very reserved guy. There's not a lot of people outside of his family that are truly in his circle. So it's not totally surprising based off of that we haven't seen anything slip. But I will say this is probably one of the very few recruitments that we're coming down to the wire where he's going to make an announcement probably any minute, right? It could come at any point, and no one really has a firm feel on where he's going to go. I think in the end, Indiana has to be feeling decently well about where they're at this current moment. We'll see if that does come to fruition, but the Indiana talk has definitely picked up again over the last 72, 48, now 24 hours. So we'll see if it comes true. Illinois has not as many spots to fill as Indiana does, so Indiana can kind of play this one out. Illinois is a team that they get Ty Rodgers back, who redshirted this year, who's kind of projected to play that one kind of two combo role. Kylan Boswell announced that he was coming back as well. Another very ball dominant guard. Obviously, you have Josh Dix, who can play off the ball, but they're starting to be a couple more pieces that they want to add that they can't keep waiting on Josh Dix for. Indiana can keep adding pieces and they can still wait for Josh Dix, right? I mean, they have a point guard in Conor Enright. They have now a wing in Tucker DeVries. Obviously, you have Trent Sisley. So you have 3 spots, but you still have an entire roster to pull out. So it's not like you need to specifically wait and take Josh Dix versus someone else. You can take Josh Dix and still get another 6'3", 6'4" shooter, because we already know that Darren DeVries wants multiple players who can play that position. And you're going to see probably 4 or 5 guards and shooters in the rotation regardless. Talking to a few people, money is not really the true deciding factor for Josh Dix. It's one of the boxes that definitely has to be checked off, but it is not the end all be all with this one. So I think that's why this one's truly kind of coming down to precisely the exact fit and the right system in order to elevate his game from already a very good player into potentially being an all Big Ten caliber type guard.
And what would he bring to Darren DeVries' system and the new team that's going to be at Indiana?
Yeah, so I mean, he's a lights out shooter, right? A sharpshooter that Indiana really hasn't seen in quite some time. Shot 43% from 3 last year. Phenomenal in catch and shoot opportunities. So again, if you look at a Darren DeVries offense, it's always 3-4 shooters with a facilitating point guard, outside of last year where you had obviously Javon Small, who was a very ball dominant scoring guard. But all of his Drake teams with a healthy Tucker DeVries, and you go back to obviously Conor Enright as well, they know exactly what that system is like, and it is spacing the floor, being able to get downhill with a driving slashing point guard who looks to create for shooters. And you need to obviously be able to space that out, and that's exactly what Josh Dix can do. Not a guy who necessarily is going to break you down off the dribble and get into the paint, but a very good mid-range shooter, about 15, 16 feet, elbows and extended, where he likes to get to off of 2 dribbles when he's not shooting the 3 ball. So shooting first, shooting second, and shooting third for Josh Dix, and that's exactly what you need in Darren DeVries' offense.
Well, Indiana could use some shooting, so maybe they can get him for some shooting. Just kidding. There are definitely going to be a lot of changes for certain fans, Big Ten basketball fans of teams, Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, completely, or at least for Maryland, Indiana, or Iowa, Indiana, completely different styles than what they saw just a year ago. Iowa's going to go from scoring 80 points a game to scoring 50 points a game, and Indiana is going to go from probably scoring 60 points a game to 70 to 80 points a game, with a lot more perimeter play and a lot more perimeter shooting, something they have not seen since the Tom Crean era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a vastly different group. I think a lot of that's still going to really be determined at who exactly finishes out this roster. We've seen Darren DeVries play, smaller. We've seen him play a little bit bigger on the perimeter. It's all dependent on who he's able to really secure. You look at still needing some backcourt help, obviously, specifically though, because Conor Enright's a very, very good distributor and very good facilitator, but he's not someone you can really rely on to score 15 points a game, 12 points a game. He's way more meant to be, if you get double digits from him scoring the ball, that's a good night. But he's going to be up there in 6, 7, 8, 9 assists a game. So that's where you need the depth at shooting. You need the depth as some ball handlers. But I think you're going to see probably a lot more guards and wings being committed to Indiana first, and then moving into the front court, because that's what this system is meant to be: very perimeter oriented and very guard dominant, with some hybrid forwards and then some athleticism in the front court, which again we've talked about is vastly different than the standstill paint touches that you've had with Omar Ballo or even Trace Jackson Davis, Malik Renew for the majority of his career. It's not going to be the same. It's going to be a lot more spacing on the floor and the ability to create those open looks from the perimeter.
And speaking of the front court, who are some types of players that fans could expect to see? Not names per se, but the types of players.
Yeah, I mean, guys who truly can step out and play on the perimeter. I mean, they're not necessarily a true forward. He plays a little bit more of a hybrid forward role, but Elijah Freeman visited Indiana this week on Tuesday. A guy who's getting looked at from Kentucky and Tennessee, most notably. Pretty quiet recruitment. He's from the Division II level, but absolutely lit up the Division II level scoring the ball last year. Is a guy that I would keep on your minds as Indiana fans. Guy who can shoot the three, shot 46%, but very long, athletic guy who can play a few different spots there and potentially slide into the four, especially if you have a bigger, longer center as well. So the biggest thing with Indiana, and it looks like Jonathan Gavoni just put out that Josh Dix has committed to Creighton. So there's that you can cross that off your list. The one guy that obviously Indiana was really, really looking for. Again, Creighton was kind of that team that was the wild card for the majority of this recruitment. And like I just talked about, 10 minutes ago, right? The biggest thing with him was whether or not he wanted to play with Owen Freeman again. Obviously that a lot of people put stuff out like that to try to stir up a little bit of drama, but it looks like, that wins out in the end. Being close to home was I know very critical for him. But Indiana now obviously has to turn the page, go to a couple other potential options here. And let's remember, there are still probably 50, 100, 200 players who are still going to enter the portal over the next 2 weeks, week and a half. So the options are going to be unlimited. And Indiana obviously has more space than just about anyone in the country to come play for. So this is by no means, Indiana fans are going to look at this and say, okay, you lost out on Ryan Conwell, you lost out on Josh Dix, two of the top players that you were going after, and already start to doubt some things. I don't think you need to look at it that way. You're not going to win every recruitment. And there's a lot of different ways that Indiana is going to be able to put together a very, very talented roster. Most of Darren DeVries' commitments didn't come till the end of April and beginning of May, middle of May last year with West Virginia. And you look at Kentucky's roster from last year, a lot of those guys in the quote unquote right transfer portal rankings were not even ranked in the top 50, even top 75, top 100. And you saw what he was able to do. So again, I think everyone gets a little bit too stirred up about rankings in general, but more specifically, kind of the big time sexy names. Whereas last year, Josh Dix was someone who was a good player, but not, one of the most highly sought after guards in the portal this offseason. So a lot is going to change, and there's going to be a heck of a lot more names that pop up here in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, without question, because a lot of names are in the portal that people are not paying attention to because there are so many names in the portal, and there are so many different ones to chase. We've seen so many examples of teams that Dusty May, for example, he didn't get his first recruit. They came in bunches, but it didn't come until after he had signed on to become the coach, and then it starts to happen. There's a lot going on that we don't know about that people don't know about. A lot of conversations that are happening, agents that are having conversations, and where does Indiana turn next for their guard play? Do you think? Who are some names that are popped up that look like would be a good fit?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting. I think I don't want to say right that Indiana was putting a lot of their eggs in the Conwell, Dix, Enright, DeVries basket, but they were. So it is a little bit of a hit to not land at least Josh Dix. I think Ryan Conwell was more of the outlier there. So I think you take a hard reset, and there's still probably more kind of wing front court players that are out there at this point than true ball dominant guards and shooters that Indiana has actually been in touch with. I think the kind of the all kind of full steam ahead goes to Elijah Freeman. This is a guy who again has taken an Indiana visit, hasn't necessarily been on a lot of other campuses up to this point. So it'll be interesting to see if he decides to wait until after this dead period ends on the 11th to make another visit. A couple sources told me that there potentially could be some other visits on the horizon, but as of now, Indiana was that final visit before the dead period hit yesterday, and after that, we'll see what happens. So I think you need to try to land a guy like Elijah Freeman. Put a little bit of help there. One, on the shooting side, because he is a very good shooter. But two, you're getting athletic, you're getting long, and you're getting a very formidable wing. And then you kind of have some depth there. And now you look into going all out on some big time players that are going to hit, in the next 72 hours.
Alec Lasley from theHoosier.com on 3 with us, talking some Indiana basketball. Appreciate you guys being along. Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this fantastic Friday, unless you're talking about the weather. That good weekend to stay inside, watch some Final Four games, man. No golf for you, Alec Lasley.
No, unfortunately not, but is a fun weekend for basketball nonetheless.
It definitely that, and it's boy, we've all been talking about it. This should be spectacular. These games are set up to be really, really good. I'm looking forward to them. I don't think you're going to see any blowouts. These should all be fantastic games, contrasting styles of play between all four of these teams. I don't know that I've ever seen a Final Four that had such contrast amongst the four teams and such elite talent at the same time.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think Zach talked about it too right before this, but you go over the course of the last month and a half, 2 months, and I think this is probably the four best teams, maybe four out of the top 5 or 6, right, in almost every single category that you could look at. So for everyone that was upset about the lack of upsets or the lack of Cinderellas, I think you're getting the 4 best teams that have played the best for at least the majority of the last month and a half to 2 months of the year. And have played the best in the NCAA tournament, clearly. I mean, Florida's had some moments here, especially against Texas Tech, where they didn't look like probably the favorite that a lot of people had in them. And obviously Auburn has struggled at times as well. Duke's probably the lone team that really hasn't struggled with much of anything over the course of the last month, outside of maybe the couple of second halves against North Carolina where they would blow a 25-point lead and almost lose a couple of those games. So I think in the end, I think it's going to be Florida and Houston. I think Florida's going to win it all. I think they just have too much shot making, too much power on the perimeter, too many shot makers and shot creators that you need. Walter Clayton's obviously playing at a phenomenal All-American level, and doing so almost unconsciously, making almost every single shot that he looks at. And then I think on the flip side, Houston is going to provide the length, the athleticism, and the size in the backcourt, and on the perimeter that Duke is yet to see. And I think that's really going to limit a little bit of what they want to do offensively. Houston has, guys 6'3" to 6'6", 1 through 3, but that have massive wingspans and are absolutely athletic. That not only is Duke not seen in the ACC, but they really haven't seen over the last couple of games in the NCAA tournament. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Duke gets down early, or if Duke is down in the second half. What happens there if Cooper Flagg starts to press a little bit? If some of those shots that typically go in for Concanapple are rim outs, what happens with that front court going up against the physicality? Two freshmen with Duke going up against the veteran physical presence of Houston's front court. I think that's going to be a little bit of a question mark. So I think the time to look at is that under 8 timeout. What that looks like. I think this is going to be no more than a 3-possession game for the majority of the game. No team's really going to be able to stretch that. But I think Houston just has too much versatility to be able to switch 1 through 5 that Duke hasn't been able to see and take on the majority of this season. And I think that's going to limit what Duke wants to do offensively, just enough to have Houston pull out the win.
Wow. It'd be interesting to see that. I've had Florida pick to win it, but not that that would be a shock for them to win it or for Houston to win it or either of the other two. Auburn not getting as much of the 4. I'd say Auburn is not being talked about as much as the other 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with, Auburn has probably been the one team over the last month and a half that hasn't been as dominant. I think there was a lot of thought that maybe they peaked a little bit too early. They're Janai Broome obviously phenomenal, but some of the injury issues with the ankles, with the shoulder, with now the elbow, I think that has a lot of doubt in people's minds, because if he's not on his A game, there's nowhere else that Auburn can go in the front court. And a lot of what they do is playing through Janai Broome. And if they're not able to do that at a high level, they have struggled at times this year. So I think that's the one thought there is, if he's healthy enough, they're probably going to be just as dominant as Florida's been. But I think anything can happen, right? When you're playing a team from your conference in the Final Four, these teams know each other extremely well. Florida and Auburn. It's a fun matchup with the physical play that Auburn brings from the guard perspective, with the explosiveness that Florida brings from the guard perspective on the offensive end. I just think if you have multiple shooters, it's very difficult to guard that, no matter how good your defense is. And I don't care the amount of people that say defense wins championships. It doesn't. Offense always wins out, in my opinion. There's a reason why Houston always makes it to a certain point, but then doesn't make it and be the last team standing, because they have struggled a little bit offensively over the course of the last couple of years in terms of shot making ability, not in terms of scoring, just shot making. And if you have shot makers, that's what leads you to victory. And so I think that's the one thing that, outside of probably Pettiford for Auburn, they just don't have the depth at the shot making ability that Florida does.
Indiana players, Malik Renew, while he wound up at Miami, he is the only one right now that I've seen find a landing spot. Is that right?
Say that for
the former players, former IU players.
Ja'Kai Newton just actually announced that he was going to Georgia State in the last minute. So there's another one. And
that tells you something right there. Their landing spots kind of give you an idea. And I was also going to say, you haven't really heard of Kanan Carlisle being in demand, even Miles Rice, who had a great freshman season and a okay season last year, playing in the team that he was playing, or in the style that he was playing in. But I haven't heard a lot of their names popping up much.
Yeah, and that's because of the seasons that they had last year, right? I mean, that's recency bias, or whatever truth you want to put to that. That's exactly what it is. And
They're going to take a
unfortunately,
pay cut.
yeah, and I think I saw a lot of local teams looking at Kane Carlisle down in the Atlanta area. I think Georgia was looking, Georgia Tech were some of the reported ones. I know Georgia State as well. So I think George Mason. So you're going to get a lot of more mid majors probably for these guys. And let's be honest, it probably would be best if a guy like Kane Carlisle goes to a mid major, lights it up, gets a little confidence back in him, and then I don't think anyone would be shocked to see any of these guys back in the portal the year after getting a little bit of confidence, taking a step back, and then going back to a higher level program.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with Caleb Banks, who went to Tulane. I don't know, has he found a landing spot from Tulane yet? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
he is rejoining his buddy CJ Gunn at DePaul.
That's what I did see that. Yes. Not really much of a step up from Tulane to DePaul. I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you get the Big East pull, Chris Holtman, and everything like that.
Money, because that reminds me of Kevin Willard's move to Villanova. All these Big East teams, they don't have football programs. Rev share, baby. That means they're going to get the Lions' share of the rev share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, money talks, but again, the 1 year kind of commitments talk a little bit more. So again, I would not be surprised to see a lot of guys, not just Indiana guys, but just a lot of guys in general, right? A lot of these commitments are 1 year commitments for both the coaches and the players. So it is by no means, when you get a commitment, even from the high school level, a multi-year commitment anymore. Like it used to be. The transfer portal has obviously taken over everything in college athletics, but specifically college basketball. And I think obviously finding a way to bring back down a little bit of that NIL and make it way more regulated is the only way to limit some of that. I don't think the transfer portal has ruined college athletics. I think it's the way NIL is has gone about has ruined a little bit of it and made the transfer portal a lot more of what it is now than what it was meant to be. So I think it starts with NIL, and then you move into probably limiting a little bit of the transfer portal nuances that come with.
Last thing, what can Indiana fans expect to hear next?
Yeah, obviously with the dead period here, no visits until the 11th, so you're not going to get a ton of movement on that end. There was always the talk about Josh Dix obviously committing at the end of this week, and as I said, right, it was a commitment that was going to be any minute. Outside of that, you probably take a little bit of a hard reset in the recruiting aspect. Think the one name that you focus on, right, is Elijah Freeman. As someone who could potentially commit over the next few days. Just because someone hasn't seen campus, though, doesn't mean that they won't commit. A lot of Zoom calls are going to be taking place. So I think you'll start to see probably some new names pop up because of the amount of Zooms that will take place over the next 8 days. And it'll be a little bit of sifting through which one of these guys are legitimate targets versus which one of these guys are, more or less, let's try to see if they're going to move up the list or not. And I think you'll have a lot better understanding of what this roster could look like come April 11th than obviously what it is right now.
Looking forward to it, brother. Thank you. I hope you have a great weekend, not having to be too busy with keeping up with things at thehoosier.com and On3.
I appreciate it, Jim. Have a good one.
Absolutely. And make sure you go there. They've got a special, $1 for the first month, 50% off for the entire year. Man, big thanks to everybody for joining us on the program today and all week, especially each and every one of you. Without you, we can't do this. So happy to be here for you and look forward to being back on Monday, catching up with everything that goes on over the weekend. The Final Four teams, the championship will be set. And we'll see if there's anything new with Indiana basketball and Indiana football then. I hope you guys go out, have a safe weekend, stay out of the weather. Until Monday, I am Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on theHoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to theHoosier.com On3. Now with On3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football, Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at theHoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today. Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to theHoosier.com On3. Now with On3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football, Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at theHoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today.